Good afternoon, everyone. Please let me know if you can hear me in the comment section. All right, thank you. Give me 1 minute. Let me see. I don't know if why this is blinking, but let me quickly troubleshoot that. All right. So good afternoon once again, everybody. Today is the final day of the 10-day Terraform training. I'm sorry yesterday that I couldn't post this video yesterday. So I wasn't available. So I've decided instead of me doing this, posting out the recording, I decided to do this live and direct so that whatever kind of troubleshooting that we encounter, we can troubleshoot it together and we can have you can see how you can troubleshoot Terraform issue in real life scenarios, and you can as well use this if you are prepping for an interview. You can use it as how you solve complex problem. All right, without wasting much of your time, let's get started. So today we're going to be deploying a 3-tier architecture application on AWS using Terraform. So I've tried to design the architectural diagram before the class so that we can reduce the total numbers of time that we're going to be spending, because this is supposed to be 1 hour class, but because of this, the 3-tier architecture is not something that is easy to quickly deploy. So we might spend more than 1 hour today, possibly like 2 hours. So that's why I did try to design this, but I'll quickly explain this architecture before we proceed. This is a 3-tier architecture, and the first tier here, this is the presentation layer. This is like your front end. On the front end, we have 2 servers, server 1 and server 2. Both of them are being managed by a load balancer that routes traffic to either one of them. So those are the presentation layer. Then the second layer is the application layer. The application layer too is being managed by a load balancer that routes traffic to the 2 applications. And the last layer is the database layer. On the database layer, we have the main database, which is the primary database, or you call it main database, and we have the secondary database, which can serve as the root replica. So if the first database is having issue, then the second database can be promoted to as a primary database. So we are going to be looking. Is my voice still echoing? Let me know. Somebody say my voice is echoing. Is it still echoing? Let me know. Can you guys hear me clearly? Post in the comment section if you can hear me clearly. Just say yes or thumbs up. No, good. Okay, thank you. Say it's clear now. All right. All right. So for the first layer, I've explained it earlier. We have both the front and the we have both the application layer, presentation layer, which we have two server, and at the application layer, we have two servers as well, and at the database layer, we have the main database and the secondary database. So this is what we are going to be deploying. And if you want to take this architecture a little bit more higher, you can show how they will be interacting. This application, the web server, will be interacting with the database. With the application layer, while the application layer will be interacting with the main database, and the two application layer can send data to the database simultaneously at the same time. And if anything is stored in the database, it will be replicated to the secondary database, while the two web server can send application or can send traffic to both the application layer. But if they are sending traffic to the application layer, they can send the traffic directly to the load balancer that is managing the application layer instead of interacting directly with the application layer. So the two web server will send traffic to the database, and the database will take the traffic and distribute it between the two application layer. But I just decided to remove the border, this line, to make it a little bit clearer. I just decided to remove that line to make it, I don't want it to be too rough. So, but that is the way they will communicate. I'll just leave this line. I think this line is a little bit more clearer. So now, without wasting much of our time, let's just jump into the Terraform and start deploying this. So as we all know that, as I said earlier, is that whenever you are deploying any application, always try to open the documentation of whatever application you are deploying, if you can see the documentation. So I already have my Terraform documentation. And if you don't know how I got here, anytime you just go to terraform.io, go to the registry, and from the registry, go to the provider, browse provider, then select whichever provider that you want. So I'm going to be working with AWS. Then once I get to the AWS, I want to open the documentation for that provider. So this is where you get all the documentation from. So I'm going to open this is the file or folder that we've been using. So I've created a folder called 3-tier applications, and in the 3-tier application, I've also created my provider.cf, which just holds my provider, and I also already configured my provider because I don't want to be doing that, or I want to reduce the time that I'm going to consume for this. So I already configured my provider. I've added my AWS credentials to my provider, and I also lay out some very basic pseudocode. This is just a step-by-step of what we are going to do. We might deviate a little bit from this step, but this is the main steps that we are going to follow. On the step 1, which is the creating of the architectural diagram, I already created this architectural diagram, so I can name this as done. Then we are going to start from the creating of the VPC in Terraform. So now I'm going to create inside my 3-tier application layer, 3-tier application folder. I'm going to create a file, and I'm going to call it main.cf. This is where I'm going to be putting all my configurations. So I'm not going to be creating different file. Like I told you earlier, if you are working in a real project, please create a different file for each of these. It's going to make your work look easier, but I'm just trying to reduce the time that we're going to consume. Also, apart from the main.tf, I also want to create a variable.tf, and after the variable.tf, the final one that I want to create is I want to create output dot. The output.tf, we might not really use it, so I will just create it. Then the final one that I also want to create apart from the output is what is called terraform.tf vars. So those are the files that I'm going to be using for this configuration. I'm not going to be working with the provider because I already put everything that I need for the provider. Where I got the provider from, if you go to the Terraform script, just click on provider and just copy the whole of this. That is where I got my provider from. So that is, I can just put it here again, put the provider there, and then under this place, put your region, and the region I'm using is called US East 1. So that's how I do my provider configuration. Then go to the main. So the first area we want to configure is VPC. And under the VPC, so once you open your VPC, go to the Terraform configuration. So I'm going to be putting them side by side. I hope you guys can see it clearly, but if you can't see it clearly, just let me know. I can put it back. So for the VPC, just locate VPC here, VPC, and go to the and look for VPC. It's going to be towards the end. Here, this is VPC, AWS VPC. So for the VPC, I'm going to copy this last code here, just paste it here, then modify it. So as I said, I always want to represent some of my value. I want to represent them with variables. So like this cider block now, I'm going to remove it. I'm just going to put an empty file there now. Then apart from, so why we copy this is just to have the basic configuration. Then you can go to, if you scroll down under the, if you scroll down and you go to the argument reference, you can see different kind of arguments that you can still add to whatever you currently have. So if I go down, you see, I see enable DNS support. I'm going to copy this. I'm also going to have it in my variable. And if you can read very well, you will say the enable DNS support is a Boolean flag, which means it's either yes or no. So, and what it does precisely is that it enable or disable DNS support. I want a DNS support to be enabled, so I'm going to put it as true. Then apart from that, I also want to enable DNS host name, so that my instance, whenever I create an instance, we can have a DNS host name. So I'm also going to put that there, and that one too is a Boolean flag, so it's also true or false. So I put those as true. So the main thing that I want to represent here with variables are the cider block and the tag name. So I'm going to go to my variables block, and I'm going to create a variable for those two. The first variable is going to be cider block. So I'm going to call it VPC cider block. VPC on the cider block, and I want a reference. I want a default value for that. So the default value is going to be the value that I want to use. It's going to be 10.0.0.0/16. And for the second one, which is going to be tag, I'm going to create another variable for that, and I'm going to call it this VPC tag. And I want a default value for that as well. If I'm not providing default value for it, it's not necessary that I provide the default value. If I do not provide a default value, then I need to go to my terraform.tf state file here, then provide the value here. So I can come here and say VPC cider block equal to 10.0.0.0/16. So it's either I provide the value here or I use a default value. So I will say, let me just put the value here. And for the tag as well, which is VPC tag, I'm going to call it VPC. Let me call it let's just find one name to call it. Let's just say training VPC. So that's the name I want to give it to it. So in my variable flag, I'm just going to remove the default. So I don't need the default since I've already provided the value. So now, since this is everything I need for my VPC. So the next thing I need to do now is to run Terraform init to initialize the Terraform. So we said it has successfully. So I will also go to the VPC and make sure that it is actually successful. So if I open my VPC, refresh. Okay, just what I did is initialization. So here I'll now do Terraform plan. I always told you to do Terraform plan to see what Terraform is going to do before it deploys it. So I'm doing Terraform plan now. If Terraform is going to show me what it's going to do, I'll just do Terraform apply. Okay, you can see I have a issue here, issue about key. I've configured the key before, but it's still giving me error for the key. So I'll quickly look at the key and reconfigure it. So I'm going to the Terraform encountered an error, and this is the credential error. So I'm going to do clear. Do I have in my provider? Okay, the reason why it's giving me that I did not see the inside the folder that I'm using. So let me quickly see the inside that folder, then we run the Terraform init again. So I've see the inside that folder where I have my file. So here I'm going to do Terraform init again so that you can initialize Terraform folders and file inside that particular folders. So once you initialize Terraform folders and file, then I'm going to it will initialize the folder by installing the plugins. So I'm going to clear this, then do Terraform plan. So once Terraform show me whatever it's going to do, then I will do Terraform apply. It's an invalid address block. Okay, so when I created Terraform, when I created the main, I removed this value. So I put them in a variable, but I do not specify the variable here. So for me to specify the variable here, I just need to do var the name of the CIDR block, and the same thing with this var the name of the CIDR block that I use. Let me see what was the CIDR block I use in the provider and the variables. The CIDR block is called VPC underscore tag. Is that the same thing I use in my Terraform provider here? So go back to the main and put var.vpc underscore tag. Then I'm going to run this again. Okay, so it's going to deploy one, then I'll tell it to go ahead by planning apply. I don't want it to come back and be asking me for confirmation, so I'll just give it auto confirmation, which is by saying auto approve. So once Terraform deploy this, we will see the new deployment here. You can see currently I only have one default VPC. So by the time I refresh this, it should give me 2 VPC if Terraform deploy it successfully. It's showing Terraform is creating the VPC. So let me refresh this. You can see Terraform has deployed it and call it Terraform training.vpc, because that is the name that we specify in the provider, Terraform.tf files. So VPC is done. I'm going to clear the screen And back to my readout, I'm going to say this is done. Then the second thing is to create the internet gateway that we are going to be attached to the VPC. So I need to go back to my Terraform configuration and look for internet gateway. And you can see I have my internet gateway here, AWS internet gateway. I'm just going to copy the whole of the example, then go back to my main file, scroll down, and I'm going to call this internet gateway. And when I put the code there, then just do some modification. If you look at my VPC, the name of the block is main, and the resource name is AWS VPC. So if you want to reference this, if you want to reference the ID of your VPC, you just need to call the name of the resources dot the name of the block dot ID. So the name of the resources is AWS VPC, and the name of the block is main, then .id. So this will give us the VPC ID. And for the tag name, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to represent this with variable, and I'm going to call it var. I'm going to call it var IGW. So I need to, since I'm using a variable IGW there, I need to go to my variable file and create an IGW variable. And I don't really need to specify anything there, but if I want to specify the name, I just need to say default name is equal to training IGW. So just to give it a name, and everything successfully, I'm just going to do plan. So Terraform is going to plan this, and once we plan it and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, I will tell you to go ahead and create the resources. Say you're going to create one, I'll just say go ahead. And if you open the VPC now, the VPC currently does not have any IGW attached, but if you look at it now, then nothing is attached in terms of IGW. So if I go to the IGW that we have here, which is internet gateway, you see there is no internet gateway currently. Then once an internet gateway is created, you will see the one that is created. I'll keep, okay, now one is created and it has been attached to the VPC. So the second two is done. Then let's go to the third readout. The third readout is to create, I'm going to put this one as done as well. So the third readout is to create 2 public subnets and 4 private subnets. So let us go and create 2 public and 4 private. So to create the 2 subnets, I'm just going to create the public first. I'm going to call this one public subnet. And in my public subnet, I'm going to, so to create the public subnet, to go to my Terraform, look for, see under VPC, look at VPC, you will see a subnet there. Then go and locate subnet under VPC. So here is AWS subnet. I'm going to open it. Then just copy the example. Copy the example and paste it under subnet. But one thing here, I want to create 2 subnets, 2 public subnets. So if I want to create 2 public subnets, and I don't have to, the normal thing is by the default, if I want to create 2, this will just create 1. Then I can make a copy of it and paste it under here like this. Copy this. Copy this and put it here. So this will create 2 subnets. Then I can rename this. I can say this one is main 1 and this one is main 2. But I don't want to do this. I want to use the method I taught you guys in class, that you can use count. So I'll be using count to create the 2 public subnets. So the count is equal to 2. I'm going to create a 2 public subnet. So the VPC ID is still going to be the same for the 2 public subnet, but the only thing that's with different is the CIDR block. So for the CIDR block, I'm going to remove this CIDR block here, and I'm going to represent it with var, which is variable subnet underscore. I'm going to use subnet underscore cider. So I need to go and create the subnet underscore cider in my variable file. So create a variable and call it subnet underscore cider. And instead of using, because the cider block, I need 2 cider blocks. So instead of using string, I'm going to use list of a string. And I also want the default value for my variable cider block. And the default value will be inside a list because I'm using list here. So I need to provide 2 cider block, and whichever 2 cider block I'm providing, I want instead of providing the name, let's go and put it in our tf vars. So I'm going to copy this, then go to the tf vars, terraform.tf vars. I'm going to provide the value here. So I'm going to say is equal to, so the first cider block, let me just copy this and make the first cider block. So I'll just modify it. Instead of 16, it's going to be 24, and the first one is going to be 1, while the second one is going to be the same number but 2. So this one is, the first one is going to be 1, and the second one is going to be 2 to create my cider block. So that is the subnet cider block, but I'm going to call this one public. Let's name it public because we have another private. We have private, so it's going to be public and private. So because I'm naming this public cider block, then I need to copy this and go and rename my main.tf. I'm going to close this output, go to close this one too, close this. Let me open this and just close everything. So go to my main. So inside my main, I've changed this from cider block to public cider block. Then I also need to change it in my variable file and call it public cider block. So I have provided cider value for the cider block. So here I've provided a value for it. Let me see, the public subnet cider block. Then make sure that I create a variable for that, public subnet cider block. Then inside the terraform.tf vars, then public subnet cider block. So all of them are completed. Say no declaration. There is declaration for this. Variable.tf vars. Then I have public subnet cider block. So there is declaration, but it's just showing it, and that is fine to work. So if you look at this public subnet cider block, it's only going to give us a full subnet, but it's going to give us 1 subnet. This will only give us 1 subnet. I mean, it will give us the whole of the block, but we don't need the whole of the block. We just need a particular cider block. So here, what I'm going to do here, I need the value of count dots. So here, I can either get the first cider block or I get the second cider block. But if I want to get, because we are creating 2 resources here now. We are creating 2 resources and we are using counts. So if you want the first resources, because this one is going to create the first resources, and if you want the first resources to be 0 and the second one to be 1, we can change this to count.index. And when we change this to count.index, then it's going to pick the cider block at index 0 when it's creating the first one, and when it's creating the second one, it's going to pick the cider block at index 1. So I'm going to leave it that way. And the tag too, I want to change the tag name. I'm going to call it var.public cider block tag. I'm just going to call it public cider block, public sub tag. So I need to also go to my public sub tag and create a variables for that, and create a variable for my public sub tag, and that is going to be a list as well. Instead of, it's going to be a list of string, and the default value, I can create a default value for it, or I can go and put the value in the, let me prefer, I'll be putting the value in the TF vars. So the value for this is going to be, I'm just going to let me just name it string. I'm just going to call it web public subnet. I'm just going to name it public subnet. So the way this is going to work, so instead of this one string, I'm going to name it, instead of list, I'm going to name it string. But in the main.tf, so instead of it will want to give me public subnet, but I want it to give me whether public subnet 1 or public subnet 2. So the way I can do that is to use a interpolation. So the interpolation is going to be, I'm going to put all of this in a bracket, in an interpolation. So this, all of this is going to give me public subnet. Then I also want to use whether public subnet 1 or public subnet 2. So to do that, I'm also going to call the second interpolation, and here I'm going to do count dot index. But this count dot index is going to give me 0 and 1. So it's going to be public subnet 0 and public subnet 1. I don't want any of my public subnet to be 0, and I want 1 and 2, which now be public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. So to do that, because this one is going to give me 0, and if I want to turn this 0, this will give me 0, then 1. But if I want it to give me 1 and 2, I just need to add 1 here. So it will now be public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. So this is done. I'm going to go straight and apply it. I'm doing applying to reduce time that we're going to consume. But if it's not going to be fine, it's still going to tell me. But in a real life scenario, always try plan first. So if I go back to my VPC, let me open this wide and go to my subnet. You can now see public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. So I've created the 2 public subnet. Then now I need to go and create the 2 private subnet. I mean the 4 private subnet. So let's just copy the whole of this, paste it below it, and I'm going to name this one private subnet. So this is a private subnet, and this time around I want to create 4 private subnets, and the VPC ID is still going to be the same, but here instead of using public subnet, I'm going to change this to private subnet cider block, and every other thing is going to remain the same. And here too, I'm going to change it to private subnet cider block, and every other thing is going to remain the same thing. So now that I'm using private subnet cider block as my variable, then I need to go and create that variable. So I need to here copy, make this double. I'm going to go a little bit down. So this is going to be private subnet cider block, and I'm also going to create the tag, and I want to name the tag. So this is going to be for tag, and this is going to be private subnet tag. So you can see I have private subnet cider block and private subnet tag. And in my TL vars, I also going to have, I also need to do the same thing. So I'm going to create double of this. I'm going to name this one private and I'm going to name this one private as well. So now that I have the two private, the CIDR block two need to be different. The first CIDR block is 1 and 2. So the second one be, the third one will be 3. The fourth one will be 4. Then I need 2 more because remember we are creating 4 private subnets. So to create 4 private subnets, I need 4 private CIDR block. So I have 3, 4, then this is going to be 5, and the last one is going to be 6. If you have any question for me, just keep posting it in the comment chat. I will respond to it. This might take us more than 1 hour, 30 minutes, but please, I will just make sure that I complete it because this is a normal project that can take companies months. So we're trying to do it within 1 or 2 hours. And I'm not just going to be jumping. I will be explaining all my steps so that you can understand it. So I have the subnet 1. This is going to be private subnet 1, private subnet 2, private subnet 3, and private subnet 4. So those are all my private subnet. And I have the subnet name now is going to be private subnet. And if you go back to the main.tf, I have, so this one is going to be private subnet, and the count is also going to be changing. So I will have private subnet 1, private subnet 2, private subnet 3, and private subnet 4. So let's go and deploy this. You say there is an duplicate resources name. Okay, let's go and check that. If you have any error, especially in Terraform, it will tell you the line that you need to look at, and it will also tell you what the problem is. And you can see it's telling me that my main.tf in line 33 is having issue. So I need to locate my main.tf file, then go to line 33. So you can see this is the line that is telling me the issue. And what the issue is, it also points out what the issue is all about. And you can see it's referencing the main, that a subnet resources named main was already existed, and it tell you where it actually was existed. So I need to locate that, and you can see it is here, and if you go up, is here as well. So I need to rename this. No two blocks should be the same name. So I'm going to name this private. And I can change this. Let me see, something happened here. Okay, yeah. And I can change this one to public. So now that I change it, I want to terminate that, but that is fine. You can go ahead and terminate it. Just say, as I said earlier, make sure you always run Terraform plan before you do apply. I'm doing apply just to save us some time. In real life scenario, always run Terraform plan first. And you can see I have a conflict here. So let's look at what the conflict is all about. And if you see, it's creating EC2 subnet, and it has a conflict. We have 10.0.2.0/24 conflict with another subnet. Now, this is one of the reasons why I do not want to do this without showing you guys. The reason why it's giving this problem is because the subnets already exist before. Because when we create it initially, and then we go back and modify the block name. When we change the block name, then it will not see it again. So when we say Terraform, you can see when I run Terraform apply, it initially tells me that it's going to add 6 and it's going to destroy 2. But when it actually wants to destroy the 2, it's not getting the block again. It's saying something else different because initially it is main. So if it is main, it wouldn't have given us that issue. It would have deleted it directly. But because we changed the name and it's not saying it, so what I will do in this regard is that I can target that first 2 that I create and tell it to delete it. So what I will do here is that I don't want it to delete everything. I'm going to comment this out for now. Then I'm going to also return this to main. and I can now set Terraform. I want to destroy this first two. If I run Terraform apply now, it's not going to show me anything. Everything should look normal because this is the situation we have before, except if it has already deleted two of the resources before it showed me that error. So it's actually deleted the resources before it showed me that error. So it is fine now. So what I need to do, I can now say, you know what? I want to destroy this entirely. Then I will now create the 6 resources again. If you want to destroy, if I do Terraform destroy, clear. If I do Terraform destroy, come on. If we want to destroy the whole thing, including all those VPC, internet gateway, we want to destroy everything. If you want to target a specific thing to be destroyed, just add Terraform destroy dash target. So here I'm going to say no so that it doesn't destroy everything. You can see say I want to destroy 4 things. So I can just say Terraform destroy dash target. Then the target I want to destroy, I have to say the target. So my target is the main VPC. This subnet is what I want to destroy. So I'm just going to copy this dot, then the name of the subnet. I have to put it there. So here now I'm targeting a specific subnet. So it will not see everything to destroy, but it will only see one particular block to destroy. You can see it. You only see that block, and it's showing 2 because we have 2 resources in that block. And guess what? If you want to specifically target one of that resources alone, you can target the resources alone. For instance, you can see we are doing count here. Somebody once asked me this question that if you have a count here and you want to do Terraform destroy, and you only want to destroy one out of these 2, the way you can do it is that if you look at what is giving you here under destroy, it gives you the first element and it gives you the second one. So if you want to destroy only one of these, wherever you are, let me do no for now. Wherever you are targeting Terraform destroy, just put the index there. So it will destroy that particular one at that index instead of destroying the 2. But this time I want to destroy the 2, so I'm not going to specify the index. I'm going to say yes for it to destroy that. So once that is destroyed, that means now I don't have any VPC. So I can now open this. Then I want you to create all the 6 VPC, all the 6 subnets, not VPC. I don't have any VPC, so any subnet. So I want to create all the 6 subnets again, and it will not give us that error that it was giving us that there is a duplicate or a conflict of subnet cider block. You can see now it's not giving us that error anymore. So we have our subnet, and let's go back to our readme. Let's see what has been done. So we have our subnet, and so we have, if you look at this subnet that we wanted to create, we want to create 6 subnets, and we have created it. And out of those 6 subnets, 2 of them are public subnet, 2 of them are private, 4 of them are private. Out of the 4 private subnets, 2 of the 4 private subnet is going to be for the application layer, and the remaining 2 is going to be for the database. So 2 is going to be for this application layer, and the remaining 2 is going to be for the private, for the database. One thing about database that you need to know is that if you want to deploy a database, it will need what is called a database group. That is, a database subnet group. So if you are deploying in the default subnet, then you don't need to specify the database subnet group. But if you are deploying in any other subnet, or if you have already destroyed your default subnet, like me, I always delete all my default subnets and default VPC. So if you have already destroyed your default VPC, then you need to create a database subnet group. And the database subnet group is just going to pick 2 or 3 of your current subnet, is going to put them in a group, and that is where the database will be deployed. So now, for us to do something like that, we need to go and add 2 of our current database, 2 of these 4 database. We need to go and add them under a database subnet group. So it will now use those 2 subnets to deploy our database. So now, if you guys don't understand what I'm talking about, you just go to your database, go to RDS for instance. If you go to RDS, here you will see subnet group. This is where you say when you are creating a subnet group, then you have to select the particular. If I pick this one now, for instance, then under that you have to select at least 2 availability zone. But if I choose the second one, which is the one I'm using currently, these are VPC, then here too you have to select at least 2 availability zone, otherwise you cannot deploy a database. So here I'm going to go back to my Terraform. Then to do that same thing with Terraform, just search for subnet group. So here it is under my database subnet group. Let me look. It's going to be under RDS. RDS subnet group. Here is it. So I'm just going to click this, then copy the subnet. So open again, go to my main.cf. I'm going to, under this place, I'm going to put a, I'll call it subnet group, or let me name it database subnet group, and I'm going to put the code underneath it. So here, first and foremost, is only going to be one database subnet group. Then I'm going to rename this. I don't really like using name. I'm going to call it database subnet group. And here I need 2 availability zone. That means 2 subnet ID, subnet 1 and subnet 2. So to use these 2 subnet ID, what you need to do is that, we don't have front end and we don't have back end. So I'm going to clear this off for now. And this is how I'm going to get the value. We need subnet ID. And if you go to our subnet, our private subnet, we are using block of 4. So I'm still going to call this block. I'm going to call this block inside my, I need to call the block inside my subnet ID. So this will give us a block and not a specific, it will give us a block and not a specific ID. So to get an ID from this, I can pick 2 subnets. I can pick 2 subnets. You can just pick any of the 2 subnets. So I'm going to pick the first subnet, which is at index 0 out of the 4 subnets. Then I need that, when I pick that subnet, so it's going to give me the block, that block subnet, the whole of the block subnet. Then to get the ID from the block, I just need to do dot ID. So this is for subnet 1, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that for the second subnet. So now I'm getting subnet 1, subnet 2 ID. So this is just their ID for the 2 subnets, and this is all I need to do here. So I'm out of these 4 subnets, I'm picking 2 of them as a database. I don't want to use the first and the second. You can use the third and the fourth. So the third is going to be at index 2, and the fourth is going to be at index 3. So I can use the third subnet and the fourth subnet. The main thing here is just pick two subnets out of this 4 subnets and use them as a database subnet group. So that is everything I need to do there, and I'm going to run this code again. You can see it's added it. So if you go to our subnet ID now, just refresh. Subnet group, just refresh. See, we have our subnet ID. Now that we have our subnet ID, so we can now go back to the README, and let's see what has been done and what is left to be done. So we have this done. Then the next thing is to create route table, public route table, and private route table. So let's first go and create one public route table. The ideal thing is that whenever you are deploying VPC, the public subnets, even if you have 3 public subnets, it's okay for the 3 subnets to be all together under one route table. But for private subnet, always make one private subnet, one route table. That is the best and the best practice. One private subnet, one route table. But for public, you can use one public subnet for, one route table for whatever, how many subnet that you want, public subnet. So we have 2 public subnet, and I'm going to use only one route table for the 2 public subnet. But for the private subnet, we have 4 private subnet, and I'm going to use 4 route table. So let's go to the public subnet and create a route table. Public subnet route table. So go to the main. I'm going to say public subnet route table. So go to the Terraform script again, look for public subnet, and look for route table. Route table is here. I'm going to copy it. So one thing I always tell people, that whenever you are deploying anything, always go to the documentation. That's why I always like to teach people with documentation, because if I just go there and do the code without showing you documentation, the documentation might change. In 1 year's time, the documentation might change, or whatever code I put here might change. They might be writing the code in a different way. But if you actually know how to read the documentation yourself, then you can go to the documentation and get the current code from the documentation. So this is my route table. But the first thing is, I don't need IPv4, so I'm going to remove IPv4. And because I'm calling this route table public route table, the only thing that differentiates a public route table and a private route table is because of the route. If there is a route that is leading to the internet, that is what makes a public route table. That is what makes a public subnet a public subnet. So if you have 2 subnets, public and private, the only thing that differentiates them is the route that you have inside that subnet. So any subnet that has a public route, then that is what makes it a public subnet. And apart from that, all of them are private. So like this route table now is a private route table. So if I attach this to any subnet that does not have a route table before, then that subnet is a private route table. But immediately I put a route that leads to public inside this route table, and I attach it to a specific subnet, that subnet automatically becomes a public subnet. So if I want to make a browse with public route, I just need to put 10.0.0. Put a route to the internet, which is 0.0.0.0 slash 16. That is, I mean, slash 0, sorry, slash 0. Then I have to call the internet gateway route. So I created an internet gateway here. So all I just need to do is to specify the resources block dot the block name, the resources name, which is this, dot the block name. So I'm going to copy both of them, and I'm just going to come to where I have it here. I'm going to remove this people's home. I'm going to put my home, and I'm going to say dot. Then remove the 2 slash here. Let me remove the 2, then put this. So this is me. I'm specifying the internet gateway that I have, and I'm creating a public to a destination to the internet, and the VPC ID. So I created a VPC hop here too. I'm going to use the VPC ID too. And for me to get the VPC ID, I just need to specify the resources block. The resources block dot, this is the resources block dot, this is the resources block, the resources name, sorry, this is the resources name dot the resources block, then dot ID. So that is how I get my VPC ID. And every other, oh, wait, it's not here that I'm supposed to put it. So I'm just going to copy this VPC ID. So it's supposed to be here. It's supposed to be here, not there. It's supposed to be here. So this is my VPC ID, and I'm going to run this. And the tag name, I don't want to name it example because it's a route. I'm going to call it public route table. Then I'm going to deploy this public route table. Just deploy it straight. So if you go to, before that got deployed, let's quickly look at our route table under VPC. No, I think it's here. No. Under VPC, look at our route table. Here we have it. It has been deployed. Public route table. And if you open this, you're going to see a route to the internet, and you can see there is a route to the internet destination, and the target is this. But currently, it does not have any subnet associated with that route table. So we are going to go later and associate a subnet to this. Currently, when you create a VPC, the VPC comes automatically with a route table. So any subnet that you created inside that VPC will be associated with the route table that comes with the VPC. And the way you identify the route table that comes with the VPC is that if you go to all the route table, if you go under the main, it will tell yes. That means it actually comes with the route table. I mean, with the VPC when you created the VPC. But the one that you create by yourself, the main, it will be showing no. That means it doesn't come with, it's not a default route table. So if you can see, this one we created ourselves and it's showing no, meaning that it is not a default route table. But you can see there's another route table here that is showing yes. This is one that comes immediately you create a VPC, a route table will be created. And if you do not explicit, excuse me, if you do not explicit associate a route table to a VPC, I mean, if you do not explicitly associate a subnet to a route table, then all the subnets will be associated directly under the default route table. So if you open this route table now, all the subnets, they will be under this route table. So they will be using the default route table. But we don't want them to use the default route table. So we are going to associate the public subnet to our public route table. So let's go and do that. Let's first see the readme. What is, we only create one route table, and this is done. Then the next one is create route to the internet on the create a route to the internet on the public route table, which we already did when we created our route table, and we create a route that leads to the internet. Then the next one is to associate the public route table to all the public subnets. Associate the public subnet to the route table, to the public route table. So let's go here. For route table association is what we want to do now. We're going to call it public route table association. So for the public route table association, let's go to our route table again. Our Terraform documentation, then still under route table, then look for route table association. This is it, route table association. When you open it, just copy the first one. That is fine. And I'm going to put that in my here. But here now, what we actually want to do, we want to associate two subnets to a single route table. So here we need to provide two subnet ID. So the way we can provide two subnet ID, the first thing is that we need to do count, because we want to associate two route table. So route table A, subnet A, we want to associate two subnets to one route table. So this is going to be our subnet, and what we want to do here is the subnet ID that we want to associate that to that subnet route table is going to be AWS underscore that subnet. That is the subnet. If you go to the subnet, the public subnet here, so it is AWS. The resource name is AWS underscore subnet, while the block name is main. So to get the ID, we're going to do AWS underscore subnet dot main. Then here we need two ID, so we can do count dot index for the first one dot ID. Then when it's creating the second one, it's going to do dot ID again. So instead of creating two blocks like this, and we give this subnet A and this one the second subnet, we want to use the same block to create one resources. Same block to create two resources. So here I'm done with this. I'm just going to say, no, wait, the route table ID. So this is the route table we are using, this route table here, public route table. So we need to get the route table ID. So I'm just going to copy this to get the ID from that. I'm going to join both of them together, and I'm going to put ID here, dot ID. Remove it. So that is how I get the route table ID. The resource name dot the block name, then dot ID. Then I get the ID from there. So this is done. We're going to say Terraform applies. So if that is okay now, if that is successful, then if you come here and if you go under association, you will see explicit subnet association. You will see two here, because we are now explicitly attaching those two subnets to the public route table. Okay, let's see. Do we have an error here? They say it has been added. So why don't we have it? Let's refresh. So we go to subnet. Now you can see the explicit association. We have the subnet 1, the public subnet 1, and public subnet 2. Both of them has been attached to these resources. So now let's go and do the same thing for the wait. On this video, I don't want this video to be more than 2 hours. If you are getting to 2 hours and we couldn't finish it, then we will stop the class wherever it is. then we'll just fix time tomorrow and just join and quickly finish it tomorrow. I don't want it to be too long, because if it is too long, people might not want to watch it. So if you have your Terraform always on scattered and all the lines, all the equal are not on the same line, and if you want all your Terraform to follow all the lines to be on the same line, you just do Terraform FMT, then it's going to set the Terraform for you. You can see the lines are all equal now. All of them are on the straight line. So now the next thing for us to do, let's look at our README. So the next thing is to create four private route table. So we're going to follow the same means to create four private route table. So I'm going to go back to the main.tf. Then here I'm going to say private route tables. So to create private route table, I'm just going to copy the route table that we have here. So instead of going to the documentation again, I'm going to copy the route table that we have here, and I'm going to just modify it for private. So I'm going to call this one private subnets route table. And my VPC, let me see what's the ID of my VPC. I'm getting the ID of my VPC from here. So I will copy the same thing. I think that is the same thing already, so there's no need of changing that. But for the block, for instance, let's first remove this block first. Let's remove this. So what I want to do here, I want to count, because I want to create four route tables. And in the four route tables, and I also want to change their name, so I'm going to call it var.private subnet tag, then route table, private subnet route table. So for me to use the variable, I need to go and declare it in my variable.cf file. So here I'm just going to say variable, change the name to private subnet route table, and here it's still going to be string. So I also need to provide value for my private subnet route table, and the value will be inside my terraform.cf vars. So I'm going to say, so the name I want to call the private subnet route table is just private underscore subnet underscore route table. So for the route table subnet, for the route table, I want to have private subnet route table 1, route table 2, route table 3, and route table 4. So the way I need to specify that is go to my main.tf var, and here I need to turn this one to string for now. Turn it to string, and if I just turn it to string by putting column here, then it's not going to give me the value of the variable. So to still get the value of the variable, I just need to plug this inside a curly brace. And to now start having 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, I just need to do another one and put count.index inside it. So now that I have count.index, so the first one is going to be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3. But I don't want it to start from 0. I actually want it to start from 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm adding 1 to whatever is giving me. So now, if I go ahead and deploy this, by doing Terraform apply, then if I go to my route table, then I will have 4 route tables. Route table 1, you can see currently we are having only one created, public route table, just one. So now, If that got deployed successfully, then we are going to have 4 more route tables. Let's refresh one more time. You can see we started having our private route table 2, private route table 3, then we need 4 and 5. I mean 1 and 4. So you can see it if I multiply it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are our private route table. So now it's done, successful. But each of these route table now, we want to go and associate a subnet to each one of them. We want to go and associate a subnet to each one of them. So in this way, we cannot use count. We have to do explicit modification. So what I'm going to do here, to do Terraform associate, to do route table associate, I'm just going to copy this one and I'm going to paste it here. So I'm going to call this A. And the reason why we can't do associate is because we want to, okay, I think we can do associate with a count. We just need to be more explicit. We need to be more explicit. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to say I want to create an associate of 4. And here, I'm still going to use count. I'm still going to use count. And the subnet name, the subnet ID is where we created our subnet, the private subnet. Let's go and say the private subnet. Yeah, this is the private subnet. So I'm just going to call the whole name so that I can get the ID. And I'm going to paste it here. Remove this and put a dot. So I'm getting the private subnet, and to get the specific private subnet, I just need to provide the count index. So it's going to give me the first private subnet and it's going to get me the ID. The second private subnet is going to get me the ID. The third private subnet is going to get me the ID, and the fourth private subnet is going to give me the ID. Now for the route table, so the route table too, because we are attaching multiple route table, so we need to, instead of specifying only one, we also need to use count.index here. So we need to get count.index too. So now it's going to, when it gets the first one, then it's going to change this one to 0, which is the subnet at index 0 and route table at index 0. So I think it should be fine. Yeah, we can do count 2 like this. So let's see if it doesn't work, we just go back, and if it doesn't work, we just go back. Okay, it's giving me an error straight. So let's see the error. So say duplicate. Okay, that is fine. So where does it duplicate? Say the configuration A. Okay, I have A there, then I'm still using A again because we have A here, then we can't use A. So I'm just going to call this one B. Then let's proceed again. Are you guys still following me, or let me see? Okay. If you have any question, just post it in the comment box, then I will respond to it. We have another error again. Let me open this and let's see the error. You said the invalid index. So, okay. A route table dot example is an object with 9 attributes. Index count index is 3. Okay. So you say route table object with 9 attributes. So do you guys know what? If I'm doing this kind of work in a real life scenario and it's giving me an error, especially in terms of attributes and count like this, what I will first need to do, I want to first see what is the subnet bringing out first. You see, the subnet I'm calling, the route table example that I'm calling, what is it bringing out first? Then if I know what it is bringing out, then I can know how I'm going to use it. So it said the route table example is an object with 9 attributes. So let's see. We have a route table example here. Are we using the same route table? Okay. Now the route table is supposed to be different. So we are using this route table and not the one that we specify here. This is the example. The example is for this public, but the route table we are using, okay, we are using this. So I need to change this to that. So that doesn't mean that it's going to solve the issue, but let's see first. And if it still doesn't solve the issue, then we will now first remove. So we go and see, we go and use the output to see what is this particular route table bringing out first. Then we can now see what we can get from the route table. So let's just leave it that way and proceed. Let's say that way and proceed. If it works, fine. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to get the route table ID. I'm going to get the output. Then from there, we can see what is actually happening behind the scene. But I think it's working fine. So let's go to the route table, each of the route table, and let's see whether it has the route table associate. Okay, this one has not been associated with anything. Let's go to the second one. Associate, none. Third one, associate, no. Okay, I think something is wrong. Okay, it's still hardening as not successful. So it might take some minutes, but I'm not expecting it to take forever. So you might just have to wait for some minutes for it, then proceed. Let's see again. I'm gonna refresh again and see. So let's see the associate, go to route table. The first route table is this. Has it associated any subnet to it? No. So let's go back. Okay, it's taking too much time, but we don't have choice. We have to wait for it. So if it doesn't work this way, I might just go and create it one by one. But I don't want to actually create it one by one. That is what creating. And another method that I can use for this is to go and use a module. So I'll just declare a module, then just be calling the module to get the resources one by one. But I don't want to go through that route. I think this is the simplest route, and that is why we're following it, and one of the easiest as well. So let's see again. Nothing yet. Nothing yet. So let's see, it's taking forever. I'm just going to stop it and see association invalid route table ID not found. Route table does not exist. He said this route table does not exist. Let's see. I'm going to copy that route table. Say it doesn't exist. Let's go and make sure that something is fine. You said the route table doesn't exist, so let's look at our route table. Let's find that route table that say it does not exist. Oh, we have it. So that is not, and that's not our error. So I'm going to try this again. Okay, can we complete the Terraform class today? If it exceeds 2 hours, we can continue in another recorded in another recorded today. Okay, we might try that, but I also have to consider other people that may not want to wait. But let's just wait and see where we get to. Then we'll see if we can continue it today. Possibly we can even finish everything before that 2 hours time. The major area is this one that we are configuring. After this one, after we set up all the networking side, then the remaining one are kind of easy. Okay, this is taking forever. It's a line 83 in resources B. So let's see. It's not giving error, it's just taking forever to deploy. Okay, we have an issue here. Instead of subnet, we have route table, and we have route table here too. So that is a major issue. Possibly that is why it couldn't deploy it. Why do we have public subnet route table? Okay, public subnet route table. Then here we need private subnet main. No, sorry. No, we need private subnet. Where do we created our private subnet? Okay, we created our private subnet here. So we need this. So the subnet is supposed to be this and not what we are using. I think that is the major issue. This is part of troubleshooting. So instead of having subnet, we have route table. So that's why it's taking forever. So let's see again. Let's see again. Okay, we have AWS subnet route table dot route count ID. A manage resources subnet private subnet. I mean, private subnet route table has not been declared in the module. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Okay, this. Let's see what's the name of our private subnet. What's the block name? The block name is this. AWS private subnet. That's the block name. So I'm going to put the block name, entire block name there. Okay, so error solved. We have that solved. So that was a mistake that we are having. Instead of specifying the subnets, I was specifying the route table. So if you go to this private subnet one, it should be associated with private subnets, the first route table, which is the private subnet route table one, should be associated with one private subnet. You can see it's now associated with a private subnet. If you go to the second one, that one is associated to another one, which is the second. The third one will be associated, the top route table will be associated with third private subnet, and the fourth one will be associated with the fourth one. So that is settled. So you can see. So this is settled, then you can mark that as done. So create subnet is done. Associate the public route table to all public subnets to is done. Then associate for private route table to each of the private subnet. That too is done. So now we need to create a NAT gateway for our private subnet. So for this NAT gateway, I will just create one NAT gateway for all the private subnet. And the reason why we need a NAT gateway is because if you go back to the architectural diagram, if the instance that we deploy here might want to communicate to the internet, but we don't want it to go through the public internet. So if we do not have access to the internet, then it has to be here to have access to the internet, but we don't want that. So it's going to remain in its position, and anytime it wants to communicate to the internet, it goes through the route, through the NAT gateway. So let's go and deploy our NAT gateway and create a route for the private subnet. So I'm going to back inside the documentation and do NAT gateway. So go down. Here is NAT gateway under VPC. So I'm just going to, I don't need to do any dependency because I already created my NAT gateway. Okay, let's just do dependency because should in case that we destroy everything and we want to create everything again, then it has to make sure that I create the internet gateway before the NAT gateway. So I'm going to open my resources here and go to NAT gateway deployment. That's NAT gateway. So I'm going to put this here. So for the NAT gateway, we need an allocation ID, which is going to be for the elastic IP address. So we need to create an elastic IP address first. Then after that, we need to specify all the subnets that we want to associate to the NAT gateway, then just a NAT gateway name. So the first thing is let's go and create our elastic IP first, elastic IP address. So what I'm going to do up here, I'm going to create an elastic IP here. Call it elastic IP address. So let me go to elastic IP address and quickly I'm going to search for it. EIP elastic IP address, and this is it here. So for the elastic IP address, I'm going to use these resources, and you also want me to specify an instance. So I don't need an instance yet. I'm just going to say let me see, elastic IP address. You want me to specify an instance. So if you say specify an instance here, so what I will just do, copy this first one, then go to my, put it here. I'm going to remove everything inside it. Then go to the documentation and go to under argument reference. Those ones that are required are the one I'm going to put there. Anyone that is not required and I see that is an option, and then I won't put it there. So the first thing is that I want to have my tag. Although tag is not required, but it's always a good thing to have tags in your whatever you are deploying. So the tag, I'm going to have a name is equal to, I'm going to call it training EIP, elastic IP address. So tag is done. Then the next thing is, let's go back. It asks for an instance ID, but you can see the instance ID is an optional. So I'm not going to bother about it. Look at the domain. The domain, it doesn't specify whether it's an optional or is a requirement, but I'm going to specify so that it can be deployed. Say indicate if this EAP is for use in a VPC, and it's actually for use in a VPC. So I'm going to put that there. And I'm going to specify the domain. I'm going to specify the VPC ID. So because you specify indicates if this is used in VPC. So you say we should specify it to be VPC. And if you look at here too, in the example that we copied, they just specify it as VPC. So it's not the VPC ID. You just need to specify that it is a VPC. So it's a string. So I'm going to say VPC. Then is there any other thing that is required? So let's see. Go back to the associate with private IP, custom home IP, domain instance, network border group, network interface ID to associate with. So every other thing, I'm just going to leave it. You see, VPC is deprecated, so I'm not going to add that. Instead of using VPC, they are now using domain. One area that you might have issue with this is that if you are using a Terraform version that is old, then you might have to specify the VPC, because if you are using a old Terraform and you are specifying domain, possibly the domain was not in use while VPC was in existence. So if you have that kind of issue, all you just need to do for you to use this VPC, you have to go back to the old version. And I've seen a lot of people having issue with that kind of a thing. So here, everything is fine. So I'm going to deploy that first. So to deploy that, I'm going to, so this is my Elastic IP address. I always advise people, whenever you are doing any Terraform script like this, always do it once at a time. Write your first code, write one. If you can deploy it and make sure that is not giving you error, because if you are just writing all the Terraform blocks, if you write more than one Terraform block, let's say you have 4 Terraform blocks, you write the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. By the time you run Terraform apply, you might be having a lot of error and you won't know which one is actually causing that error. So now I'm going to deploy this first, and once that is successful, then I will go to the next one. And also, I need to see, if I go to my Elastic IP address, let me duplicate this, and I need to go to my EC2 instance to see the Elastic IP address, if it's successful or not. So if I go to the EXP Elastic IP address, now I have the Elastic IP address is successful, so I can proceed. I can proceed. And this Elastic IP address says it is public. So one thing that I might want to check is that, does this specify any, okay, it doesn't specify any, whether any specific subnet. So I'm good there. Then the next thing to proceed, to do is uncheck this, uncomment this out. Then you want to use the Elastic IP address ID in our NAT gateway. So to use that, I'm going to specify it. We need it here. So we don't have example. The one we have is called ID, which is this, the resource name, AWS EIP, and this is it here, AWS EIP. Then we have LB, and we have the LB here. Then we have the ID. We are getting the ID of that. And for the subnet, inside which subnet should do be. So we can go to any of our public subnet because the NAT gateway will be inside a public subnet. So I need to just pick any of my public subnets. We have a public subnet here. This is a public subnet. So I'm just going to pick any of these 2 public subnets. Then I'm going to use that as my NAT gateway. So I'm going to pick one. So if I pick this, this is going to give me the whole block. And out of the block, there are 2 public subnets. So out of the 2, I want to pick one. So I can just pick the one at index 0. And what do I need from that? I need the ID. So that is everything I need there. And I'm just going to leave the tag name like that. And the dependency. So I'm going to still continue with the dependency, meaning that I want to have my AWS Internet Gateway, then the Internet Gateway block. So I need to go to my Internet Gateway and see the name of my Internet Gateway block, and the name is GW. So if I go back, instead of having example here, I want to have GW. And with this, I'm done with the NAT gateway. So I just need to deploy this. Say you typed ID instead of LB. Okay, let me see. I will look at that. It will give me an error. Then I can. Okay, yeah, you are right. ID, but not declare. Okay, it's supposed to be LB. Let me see. Okay, it's LB. So I'm just going to copy it. Yeah, I'm just going to copy it. Thank you, Paul. Say in line 100. Yeah, I think that's what we just corrected now. NAT gateway is one of the resources that will always take a longer time to create. Even if you are creating it directly on the console, it takes more time than every other resources. So we might have to be a little bit patient for this. So just let's go to NAT gateway and refresh. Okay, it's actually getting created, but it's pending. So until it is available, then we won't be able to proceed because it has to wait. So let's refresh and see. Yeah, it's depending. It take longer time than most resources. So while we are waiting for the NAT gateway, we know that the NAT gateway is creating successfully. We can go back to our README file and see where we are currently at. So we are line 10. So I'm going to mark this done as well because NAT gateway is being created. So the next one is to create routes to the internet on the route table associated to the private subnet and not public, because we already created a route to the public subnet. So we just need to create a route to the NAT gateway on the private subnet. So create route to the NAT gateway on the create route to the NAT gateway on the route table associated to the private subnet. To each of the private subnet. So on each of the private subnet, we need to create a route that is going to route traffic to the NAT gateway. So anytime that the resources in that route, in that subnet want to go to the internet, they have to use the NAT gateway. So now let's proceed, go back here and let's go to the main bag. So here we're going to say route to the NAT gateway. Or yeah, route to the NAT gateway. Route to the NAT gateway. So in the NAT gateway, let's go to the in each of these. Let me see, how do we specify the route? So if you want to create a route, all you just need to do, go to the documentation and go under route. Go to route. That's the route is going to be under VPC. So it's going to be VPC route here, AWS route. Click on it. And I'm going to copy the first one. Then go to my Terraform here. I'm going to paste it here. So we want to create a route to the NAT gateway. So the first thing, if you want to create a route to the NAT gateway, you need to specify the route. You need to specify the route. You need to specify the NAT or the route table ID. That means the route table that you are using. And also, you need to specify the destination block, and you need to specify the target. You need to specify the target. So this three is not really useful for us. So because we want to use this route to create 4. So I'm going to use count here as well, because we have 4 route table. So I'm going to use route there. So here I'm going to say it is, because we need to get each of the route table ID. We need to get each of the route table ID. So I'm going to use variable route table ID, variable route table ID. We need to get each one of them. I'm going to say variable route table IDs because there are 4. Then here we need to get each of the CIDR block. So I'm going to call this one subnet variable dot subnet. We have subnet, private subnet CIDR block. Let me go and look at the CIDR block that we use for the private subnet. So if I go to my variable, we created a CIDR block for the private subnet here. So we're still going to use this. So I'm not going to declare that again. So we're going to use the private subnet CIDR block as the target. Then here, I'm going to leave this one here. So this one, because it is going to be, let me hide it. So out of the ID, we need to get the count of each one of them, count.index. Then we need to put we need the ID of that. And here, what we need to specify here is the NAT gateway. Is the NAT gateway that we created. So I'm going to remove here. So if you go to the arguments, you just look for the NAT gateway. Here, this is the NAT gateway ID. So instead of that, I'm going to use the NAT gateway ID here instead of the VPC peering. And here, for the value, I need to get the value of the NAT gateway that we just created. And to get the value, I'm going to copy this and append, join both of them together with a dot and append ID. So that is me getting the NAT gateway ID. So I'm getting the NAT gateway ID. And this is depending on my route table, and the route table must be created. So the route table, I can use, I don't really need this because I already created my route table. So I'm going to remove this. So I just need to put this. So for the CIDR block, I also need to get the count of each one of them. And what I need, I just need to get the count of each one. And here, I just need to get I need to declare a variable for this because I have not declared variable for that. So I need to provide the variable for the route table IDs. And the route table IDs, okay, wait. So instead of declaring a variable, because we need to get the route table ID, and so we don't actually need a variable here because we are creating our route table here. So we just need to go to the route table, and where we are creating the route table, subnet route table. So we just need to call all of this route table. Call all the route table. So I'm going to join them together. So this is going to give us all the route tables. So I want to get the index of each of the route table dot index dot ID. So what I'm doing here is that, we need a route table ID for each of them. We are creating 4. So for the first one, we need a route table ID. So for me to get the route table ID, I just need to call the route table block. And the first route table block will be at index 0. So that's why I'm picking the one at index 0, and I'm getting the ID from it. And for the subnet 2, so for the destination CIDR block, I'm using the variable that I declare at the private subnet CIDR block, and I'm picking the first one for the first route table. And for the NAT gateway, I'm using just one NAT gateway for all of them. So that is why I'm using one single NAT gateway. So I'm going to deploy this. This this is okay. It's asking me the variable. I don't want to be providing the value for the variable as we go. I'll just go and declare it. So I don't need to specify it because I'm not using it. So I'm just going to remove it. So I'm creating this on the go. It's not that I have any documentation prepared for this apart from the README. So if in case you discover anything, you can let me know. This is just, I'm just showing you that, okay, if you have this and you don't have anything to turn to, how do you solve this? How do you work your way out from this? So I have an error in main 115. And so let's go and look at our main 115, and it's talking about, what's the error? You say okay, we are having the same route table index object here. 115, main 115. Let's see what's going on there. Here, okay. It's in a route table ID. We have a route table example index of 0 ID. So let's see the route table we have here. We need a route table ID. So let's go and see our route table, the route table ID. So let's see the route table. What are we getting back in our route table first? That is the private subnet route table. And this is our private subnet. No, that's association. So these are private subnet route table. And in our private subnet route table, okay, we are not getting, okay, this is in public. We need the private subnet route table. Okay, this is the private subnet route table. Okay, I'm going to copy this too. That is the block. Okay, private subnet route table. Okay, so we are using the example, and it doesn't supposed to be example. It's a different one. So we are using the wrong one there. That's why we have that issue. So this is the correct one. So let's see private subnet route table. Let's see the error we're going to get again, if we are going to get any error. Okay, we have 2 more hours to go. Wherever we stop there, I'm going to stop the video there and see if we can continue. Otherwise, we'll just meet same time tomorrow and just round it up. Okay, this is done. The route table is done. So if you go to each of the route table now, each of the private route table now, we are going to have each of the private route table. If you go to each of the private route table, we are going to have a NAT, a route that leads to the NAT gateway. So let's click the first one, and you can see we have a route that links to the NAT gateway. If you go back and click on the second one, you will have a route that links to the NAT gateway, and the same for all of them. The same for all of them. So they have a route that leads to the NAT gateway, and is using the CIDR block of that particular route. I mean, of that particular subnet. So if you look at the subnet associate, you see, is using the 4, the subnet at 4. And if you look at the subnet associate, and the CIDR block is 4. So that means we are on point. So let's quickly go to the README. So this is done. Create routes to the NAT gateway on the route table associated to each other. So this one too is done. This is what we just did now. Then create route to the internet on the route table associated to each of the private routes, and this too is done. So we have completed the networking part of the training. The networking part, everything is done. So if we go to our AWS now, let's start. We have a VPC. Let's quickly refresh. We have a VPC, and in the VPC, we have a NAT gateway. I mean, we have an internet gateway associated with that VPC, and we have multiple subnets inside that VPC. We have we have 4 private subnets and 2 public subnets, and each of the public subnets were associated to a route table, to the same route table that has internet access. And all the private subnets, they have their own specific route. Each of the, let me see, okay, now good. You can look at this architecture to see what is actually going on. We have the public, we have all the route table, each of this route table, the private route table, each of the private route table is using their own specific subnet. You can see this subnet is using this subnet 1 is using route table 1, private route table 1, and it's attached to a NAT gateway. And if you go to the second one, you see it's attached to a route and a NAT gateway. The third one, which is private subnet, it has a route and a NAT gateway. And one thing you should see here is that all the private subnets, they are in different, all of them are in different availability zone. The 3 is in availability zone B, 2 is in C, 2 is in D, and we have 2 here that are in the same availability. So we should have corrected that, but that is fine. So we should have corrected this with availability zones, but that is fine. I won't, because of this, stop the training. But we are actually get all the network sets, and this is a very good point. So now the next thing in our agenda, let me see time. Okay, we still have 2 minutes more. So the next thing in our agenda is the presentation layer. So for the presentation layer now, we need to create 2 instances in 2 different public subnets. So we need to create 2 instances in 2 different public subnets. So to create an instance, just go to the documentation again, look for EC2 instance. And we're also going to be using counts this time around. So we want to create 2. So go to the main. So here I'm just going to say present layer. So we need to create EC2 instance. So we are creating 2. So I can bring the AMI, and I can as well go and copy it. So I don't want to waste much time on this. I already have one of the AMI in my Terraform.tf state here. So I'm going to be using this AMI. So if you want to use Terraform to bring the AMI, you just use Dara, which is easy to do. You just use the Dara to bring it here, something like this. In one of this training, I also show you how to do that. But for this time, I'm just going to go directly and put a variable called v.ami. And in my variable file, I'm going to declare it here. I'm going to say variable AMI. And in my Terraform.tf var, I'm going to specify it here as AMI is equal to, then provide this value. So that is done there. Then what other things? The instance type, I'm also going to use variable to provide the instance type. And instance type, I need to go to my variable and also declare it. Variable, I'm going to call it instance type. And for the TF vars, I'm going to provide the value. So I'm going to say instance type is equal to, I'm giving it T2 micro, T2 dot micro. So I need to deploy this and see, okay, I said I want the two to be in a public subnet, and each one of them should be in each of the public subnet. So the two public subnet that we have, let me go to the, if we go back to where we created our public subnet, the two public subnet, this is the name of the block. So I'm going to copy the name of the public subnet block. Then I'm going to go to my EC2 instance. Here, I'm going to specify subnet ID. You can specify subnet ID with subnet ID. So I'm going to provide the subnet block. And for the ID, I'm going to use count because I want to create two instances. So then I'm going to say dot ID. So here I'm getting the subnet block, and the subnet block at index 0, I need the ID. Then the subnet block at index 1, I need the ID. So here I will need count is equal to 2. So, and for the tag name, I also want to change the tag name. So I'm going to use variable dot instance tag. Then for the instance tag, I need to declare the variable instance tag, and I need to provide the value for it in my terraform.tf var. That is instance tag, and the value is going to be web app. So let's call it web app. So I'm going to use web app 1, web app 2. So for the web app 1 and 2, then for me to have 2, I have to put this in a bracket here. So then I need to provide the count with interpolation count dot index plus 1, because I don't want it to give me web app 0, web app 1. I want web app 1, web app 2, and both of them in a different subnet in each of the public subnets. So here I'm going to clear the screen. Now the Terraform, let me apply this straight. So if you go to our architecture, back to our instance, 2 instances should come up, and each one of them should be in a different public availability zone. And if you go to our diagram, this is where we have this and this. This is what we are creating. We have already created all the entire architecture and the networking architecture. So we want to create the web app 1 and web app 2, which is the instance. So we see we have web app 1, web app 2, and if you look at inside which subnet is this, both of them should be in a public subnet. So you can see it inside a public subnet. And one thing that you should notice that it's not giving us a public IP address. And this is what we can control in our public subnet, because in the public subnet, we didn't specify that it should auto-generate a public IP. And I can do that by going to my Terraform and look for subnet. And if I look for subnet under my VPC, if I look for subnet under my VPC, let me search for VPC, then I can go to subnet from there. VPC subnet. Here, if I go to subnet, then I can say enabled. Where is that? I can say, is this subnet? No, that's the data source. Here is what I need. So under the argument reference, I can enable public IPv4. Here, this is it. By default, it is false. So that's why it's not giving me a public IP. So I can say map public IP on launch. So I just need to go to my subnet and put this in my public subnet. And I'll just set it to true. Put it here, then set it to true. So anytime you create a subnet, anytime you create an instance, it will automatically give it a public IP. So I'm just going to say approve. Then if you want to do some modification, I'm not sure if this is one reason that it is good to do plan before you apply, because if I do plan, thank God that it's not destroying anything, it just change it. So because it changes, then it's not destroying anything. But now, unfortunately, the two instances that I created earlier, they will not have a public IP address. So because of this, I will need to terminate that two instance, and so that I can recreate them so that they can have a public IP address. So if I do Terraform destroy, you want to destroy the whole thing, but I don't want it to destroy everything we've been creating since morning. This is like a month or 2 months project that we just did. So, but what I want to do is to explicitly destroy the instance alone. Look at it, it's going to destroy 28 things which we have all created. So I'm going to say no. But what I want to do now is still destroy. So I'm going to do target, and I'm going to target the EC2 that I just created. This is what I want to destroy. I'm destroying both of them. So I'm just going to do dot. So I'm going to say, go ahead and destroy this. You don't need to have any space in between. Say yes, go ahead and destroy the two resources, just two. So once you destroy those two resources, I can recreate it, and when I recreate it again, it's going to automatically have a public IP address, and that is exactly what I want. So if you go here now, you see most of them are being terminated. They've been terminated. You can control this. If you want it to create before it terminates, you can use Terraform lifecycle. We use Terraform lifecycle in one of the video we did within the 10 days, that it first creates the resources, then it now destroy the one that we don't want. But by default, we first terminate, then create again. So if we refresh now, we start creating two. Okay, we didn't ask it to create, so we can now go back and do Terraform apply so that I can recreate those two resources. And this time around, it will attach IP address at launch. So it's creating the two resources again. So if we refresh now, we see two resources coming up. And this time around, they will have a public IP. You can see now they have a public IP address attached. So while we wait for this is successfully created, both of them. If you go back, you see both of them are successfully created. and both of them will have a public IP address attached. So while we're done with that, we can go back again and start to create the private one. So you can see this one to has a public IP. Now let's go and create the private instance. So for the private, we are just going to use the same thing, but this time around, so let me call this one public EC2 instance, and I'm going to copy the entire thing and call this one private. So this one is going to be the application layer. I'm still coming back. We still create the load balancer for that instance, but for now, let's just do the I'm going to call this one application, and here we need two as well. And the AMI, we can use the same AMI. The instance type, we can use the same instance type. But for the subnet, it's going to be a different subnet. So this time around, we want the private subnet. So let's go and get how do we declare our private subnet. So this is the private subnet. So I'm going to call the two number here for my private subnet. So I'm going to put that here, private subnet.tf. So the private subnet is going to pick two of the private subnet and deploy the resources. But one thing that I want to actually dictate here is to make sure that it doesn't deploy it in the database subnet. We want the 3 and 4 instead of the database. So that, let me see how we can do that, because we just use counts, it's going to start with 0 and 1. That is fine. But what if we accidentally start with 3 and 4? I think it will just start with zeros and 1. So this time around, I can create them separately in order to avoid that. I can create them separately. And the other thing that I can do here, yeah, I can create them separately. Let me do Terraform plan, and if it's not creating on top of if it's not creating the resources in the private subnet, although it's going to start with 0 and 1, which is where they're supposed to be. But if it doesn't do that, then we might have to, let me do Terraform plan this time around instead of, because we are not been running Terraform plan. So let's do Terraform plan to see inside which subnet is it actually going to create the resources. So we want you to create it in the two first subnets, so which is zeros and 1. So let's see inside which subnet will this be created. So it's going to be using 27, the one that ends with 27, and it's going to be the one that will end with 40. So which of the subnet ends with 27 and 40? So let's go to our VPC, our subnet, and see which subnet ends with 27. Is okay. It's going to create it in private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. Yeah, that is exactly where I wanted it to be created. But if it is not that, you might have to create it separately to correct that. But it's actually good. It's creating it where I want it to be. So let's go to our instance and let's see where is, so we are having another 2 resources coming up. Oh, unfortunately, these are called web app. So we want to change that. Instead of web app, we want to call it app 1 and app 2. So we can do that. That is just going to be a minor thing. And if you go to our tag name, so here, so instead of saying instance tag, you might call this one app instance tag, and the second one might be web instance tag. So we need to go and modify the variable to reflect that. This one is going to be web instance tag, and the second one is going to be app instance tag. So we need to go and declare values for that in our terraform.tf var. So this one is going to be web.tf vars, and we need a value for this. We're going to call this one app.tf vars. So this is going to be web app, and this is going to be app. This is going to be web 1, web 2, websites, and this is going to be application. Okay, those two are done. What other things? So go to my main. Let me see. App instance tag and app instance tag. So I just need to. This is just going to do replace in place. So it's not going to terminate anything. So that shouldn't be a very big issue. Let me see. Yeah, replace in place. That should be fine. When we refresh this, and it should reflect those changes here. We reflected those changes. We have website 1, website 2, application 1, and application 2. So we created the application layer. Now let's go and create the database layer. For the database layer, we want to use for the database layer, we want to use secret manager to manage the secrets. This is an important thing. So for that, let's go to our agenda and let's see where we are. No, our agenda, let's see where we are. So we've created the create 2 instances in this. We've done this. So we create a target group. We have not created that. We have not created load balancer. Create 2 instances in the private subnet. We've done this. So then the next thing for us to do is to create this app database and in the application layer. So this, I'm going to quickly go to the Terraform documentation and look for RDS. And under the RDS, I want database, relational database. Yeah, this relational database. So I need a database instance. So to get the database instance, I just need to specify. Let me copy. No, that is not what I need. Database. I need database instance, but not data. So I need to be created a database instance. So it's going to be go up. Yeah, this one, database instance. I'm just going to copy the first or the second or the third one. Let me see. Test a read replica. I need a read replica. Let me see this. Yeah, I can create a read replica. I just need to. I need no, not my SQL. You can copy the basic. I think the basic should be fine. And okay, let's use the basic. Or let me see. Is there anyone that use I think this one looks small. Okay, this one store the key in IAM profile. I don't really want that. I don't want to make things complicated. Okay, let's use this. I'm just going to modify that. So here, go back to, so I'm going to call this one database layer. I'm going to paste my database here. I'm just going to start modifying this. There are some resources that they are required. There are some arguments that they are required and some of them are not required. So for the allocation storage is required, I want to allocate just 20. I want to allocate 20. Okay, 10 is fine. Let's just leave it on 10 because we are not deploying any resources in that. For the database name, we want to leave it as my database. For the engine, we're going to leave it as my SQL engine. Engine version, we're going to leave it at 5.7. And if you want to know the latest version, you can go to the console and try, just try as if you want to deploy a MySQL, then you can get the version, but I'm good with this. For the instance class, I'm good with the instance class that I have. Manage password. Yes, I want to manage master password with, I want to manage it with secrets manager. So I just need to specify two for this. And also because I also want to encrypt my secret manager password. So I need to go back and go to the documentation, and I'm looking for how to encrypt secret manager with KMS ID. So I have a KMS ID here, but that is not what I need. I need, okay, here, master user secret, master user secret KMS ID. So this is what I want. I'm going to set that to a specific secret manager. So for me to, I can also go, okay, let me first set that. Then before I run this, I'm going to set this to, I'm just going to call it variable. I'm setting to a variable dot secret, variables dot KMS ID, KMS underscore ID. So I need to set a KMS ID variable. Okay, so if I'm setting a KMS ID variable, that means I have to go to my console and copy a KMS that I already create. But what happened? Can I just create a KMS ID and use the KMS? Absolutely yes. So I'm going to quickly create a KMS before I do this. So I'm going to comment this out for now. Go back to the documentation and create a KMS so that I can use the ID of that KMS. I'm just going to say AWS KMS key. I want to create a KMS and just deploy it here, put it here. Then this is enough for what I need. I'm not creating anything anything complex. So I'm just going to run this so that this can quickly create a KMS ID for me, and I'm going to use that KMS ID in my database. So I need to go here, go to my KMS is a custom managed KMS. So let me see, has it been created? Okay, it is created. What is the name? Unfortunately, I don't give it any name. I might just go back and give it a tag name. So I'm going to give it a tag name, and I'm going to call the name training. So that I can know the KMS that was created. And once I create the KMS, I need to use that KMS ID. Say reference. The reference to resources must be followed by at least one attribute access. Okay, sorry, it's supposed to be a string. So if I go back here and refresh, I should see the KMS ID. It should be training. I didn't see. This is the ID. So let me look for this ID in my console. Not there. So where is it created? Where does it created is, let me refresh. Okay, this is it. This is the first one. Okay, instead of key name, I'm supposed to use alias. So if I open this under tag, it's where it's going to put the name. Okay, this is it. Well, that is fine. I'm just going to, because actually what I need is the name. So it has been created. That is fine. So I'm just going to uncomment this. I'm going to uncomment that. So here, I'm going to call the ID. So to call the ID, I just need the two blocks, join them together and put ID there. So join these two together, dot ID, and that is all. So I'm going to deploy this. Wait, let me see. Is there any other thing that I need? Okay. Also, I want to make sure that it got deployed in the VPC, in the subnet group that I created. The subnet group that I created, I want to make sure that it actually got deployed there. So to specify the subnet group, I'm going to go to my Terraform and I'm going to see under RDS, how can I specify a subnet group so that you actually use the subnet group that I created. So I want to create database instance. So under the arguments reference, I need to specify the subnet group. So let's go under X, under a subnet group. Or can it be database subnet group? Let me check under the, here, subnet group. This is it. I'll copy this, go back to my resources, just paste it here. And this, I just need to specify that subnet group. So if you go to the first, when we created the subnet group here, immediately here, database subnet group. So I need to specify the ID of this subnet group. Yeah, I think the name should be fine. It's either the name of this ID, is any one of them should be fine. So I just need to go down. Or let me see, what does the documentation ask us to specify? It say name of the subnet group ID. So it's request for the name of the subnet group ID. It say if unspecified will be created in the default VPC. So if you don't want it to be created in the default VPC, you have to specify the name of the subnet group. So back here, and I'm going to join both of them together and specify name dot dot, you say name, you see name here. Then I'm going to deploy this. You can see I didn't change my name. I didn't change my username. So if you want to change your username, you can just change the username. So if I go to my RDS, an RDS should be created, and also a secret manager should also be created. Two things. So let's go to the RDS. See, one RDS is coming up here, is creating. And if you go to secret manager, the secret manager should be created because the credential for the relational database will be stored in the secret manager. And is this the one? Let me see. Yeah, we have a secret manager. I just want to make sure that this is actually the one. So the way I can know it's, yeah, is the one, because this is the key that I just created, and using the key that I created, the KMS key, this is the KMS key because it ends with 6D. And if you go to the KMS key 6D, and so that is created the secret manager. And if you want to review the secrets for the secret manager, just click review secrets for the secret manager. He has not finally created it, he's still creating it. That is why you can't see the secret. But once it is fully created, then you can see the secret. So this is the relational database. So the only last two things for us to create is to go and create the load balancer, the load balancer that will be routing traffic to the EC2 instance. And whenever you want to create a load balancer, you first need to create a target group, and then you attach the load balancer to the attach the target group to the load balancer. So let's go and create a load balancer while that one is going. So let's look for target group, load balancer target group. So I'm going to click on this. I'm just going to copy the first one, load balancer target group. Then we need to create a load balancer target group for the name. So I'm going back under the presentation layer. And here I'm going to say load balancer target group. And the name is fine. I'm not going to change the name. I'm not going to change the ports. I'm not going to change this. And the VPC ID is the only thing I want to change. So go to my VPC, then get the VPC ID, which is, you can get it by doing this. So I'm coming back here. I'm going to put this one here. So this is me creating a load balancer target name. I'm going to copy exactly the same thing because I need to create a load balancer. I need to create a target group also for the application layer. So I'm going to call this application TG target group, and I'm going to call this where is that? I'm going to call this web TG. So that is web TG and application TG. So both of them is going to be exactly the same thing apart from the name. So I'm going to change the name to application target group, and I'm going to change the name of this one to web target group. So once those are created, the next thing we want to do, we want to associate the instance to the target group. So if you go to the load balancer, if you go to the target group, you see target group as attachments. So let's open it, and you can see it's attaching a target group and the target ID, which is the instance ID, then the load balancer ARN, and both of them on port 80. So I'm going to pick this, and I'm going to pick for the first load balancer. For the first load balancer target group, I'm going to put the attachment under it. This is going to be target group instance attachment. Target group instance attachment. So the target group that I create, which is this target group, I'm going to copy the whole of the target group, and I'm going to specify it here. So it's just that we want to attach a target group together to an instance, and I'm going to remove these two lines. Then I'm getting the ARN of the target group that I created up here. Then the instance that I want to attach, the instance ID, that is the instance ID that I want to attach. The instance is actually created up here, somewhere here. This is the web. So the instance is created here. This is where the instance is created. So I'm going to copy this instance and I'm going to paste it here. And remember the instance that was created there are two instances. So for me to use the two instances, I'm going to specify their counts. I'm just going to specify asterisk, that means all the index and their ID. So this we attach both instance. So the web at the website, I mean the instance at index 1, instance at index 2, and if they are more than that, we keep adding all of them. That is asterisk, and they should be attached on port 80. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the application layer too. I'm going to do the same thing for the application layer, but the target group ARN is the second target group, not the first one. So it's going to be this target group, and I'm going to pull the target group here, and I need the ARN of that target group. That is that. And here I need to do the same thing. So everything is fine. The database has been successfully created. Let's check that and see it is active now. So if you refresh this now, the key should be able to retrieve, you should be able to retrieve the key. If you go to retrieve, we should be able to retrieve the key now. You can see we have the key and we have the password. If you go to the database, RDS, if you go to the RDS is successfully created. And this is it here. You see we have a very successfully created RDS, and you can see the port and you can see the endpoint. This is the endpoint here. So that is finished. So let's go and deploy our so if you want me, just the way we have been doing this, I can deploy this one by one. So I'm just going to comment out everything I did while the database is being deployed. I'm going to commenting this out. I'm commenting this out. I want to use this opportunity to explain it one by one, just like we've been doing. I just created it so that we don't have to wait for the database to be created while we are not doing anything. So I'm going to comment this out. So if you try to do apply, it will tell you that you are perfectly fine, nothing to add, because I didn't add anything. I've commented everything out. You see, nothing to add, nothing to destroy, and nothing to change. So now let's go and be open this one by one. The first thing is that I want to create a load balancer target group for the website, for our web layer. So I'm going to append this. And if you go to the under the instance, this is two instance. If you go under the instance, you will see if you go under the target group, it should create a target group for us. Let's see what happened. Oh, it said not created. Oh, it's still creating. Yeah. Okay, one added. So let's refresh. I see we have a target group, web target group. Then let's go. And if you open this target group, it will not have any associates. You see, it's no instance that is attached to it. So to attach the two instances that we on the public instance, I'm going to uncomment this for the public instance. Then I'm going to add. Okay, we have an issue. Let's troubleshoot it. it said Terraform encountered an error while generating this plan. So it's telling us that this is a tuple, it cannot be created like this. So let's open this and let's see what's actually going on here. So we need to append the first instance and we also need to append the second instance. So, and the way we want to attach it, okay, can we do count? Okay, let's do count here. We want to create two attachments, and here we can now call count.index. So let's say that should work. That should work. So let's create this. Then we want to attach two resources. Refresh. We want to attach two resources. And you can see the first attached, the second attached, done. So if you should refresh this now, we should see the two instances attached, the two public instances to be precise. You can see two instances. These are the two web app 1, web app 2. I mean website 1, website 2. So we need to do the same thing for the application layer. I'm going to uncomment the one for application layer, and I'm going to do count2, and I'm going to uncomment this. Let's just run this one along with it. Since so here we're going to do count.index. So just deploy both of them. Or let's follow the same principle. So let's first deploy the first one, then if that's successful, we deploy the second one. Because I'm just trying to show you how I do things, and it gives me less headache because it makes sure that I know if I'm getting an error, I know where that error is actually coming from. Oh wait, I thought I commented this out. Sorry, I don't want to create two here. I want to create one. So I'm going to remove this. I want to remove this. So it's going to terminate one and we create one. I actually one I want to create there, not two. Okay, so one created, just destroy one, we created one. So if you go back then to our target group, we're going to have a target group for the refresh. Oh, we don't, okay. So now let's create it again. So it's going to create a target group for the application layer. So you see, this is the target group for application layer. And if you open it, it does not have any instance attached. So for us to attach that, we just need to attach that, we just need to uncheck the second instance. I mean the second attachment, and this needs to be to count.12, and that is what we need there. So I'm going to attach this. Something is wrong. It said duplicated. Duplicated. Let's see. Oh yeah, we have test here. So I have test, and we also have test here. So I'm going to change this one to test one. Just So if that's successful, then we should have two resources attached. I mean, two targets attached. So successful. If you refresh, you see, oh, we attached the public again. Okay, I think we have a mistake there. We didn't change. We do not change the web. So instead of web, we want the application. So let's make sure that the instance are actually called application. Yeah, it's application, not web. So we're just going to terminate it and recreate it again. So instead of web, we should have application 1 and application 2. So refresh. Yeah, now it's now application 1, application 2. So that is successful. Now the next thing for us to do is to create the load balancer. So to create the load balancer, just go to the load balancer. So let's click on load balancer. And I'm just going to copy this and modify it. We are creating an application load balancer. So we are creating two application load balancer, one for the web server and one for the application layer. So under the attachments for the web, for the presentation layer, here, I'm going to create a load balancer. And so the load balancer, we need a name. I'm going to call this one web load balancer. And the internal is false because it's going to be public. Then the type is application layer. For the security group, oh, we have not created any security group. So for this, for the security group, we need to quickly create a security group. And for the security group, I'm not going to waste much time. I'll just go to one of the security group that we created during one of the classes. And I just hope I can quickly find one of that security group. Let me see, function. I know we created security group in one of the classes. Okay, I think when we did, let me check. I think when we did function, we created a, no, not function, expression. I think when we did expression, we created a security group. Okay, I do not copy the expression. I didn't copy the expression. I didn't copy it in my current working directory, but let me check. Okay. I can go to my, okay, let's just quickly create a new one. So I'm going to go to security group. Security group. I'm just going to create this. So before the load balancer, I want to have my security group, and I'm going to copy and undo load balancer target group. Before the load balancer, okay, let's even put it before the load balancer target group. So under the EC2 instance, I want to have a security group. I do not want to do security group before because we cover it in one of the classes, and I don't want to add that to the time of this video. So I'm just going to create one ingress and one egress. So port 443 is fine. And let me just do one more, and let's call this port 80. So I'm not going to use the, what's it called? The dynamic content, the dynamic block, because I created it in one of the videos. So I'm just going to use this opportunity to show you the other means of creating security group. So should be fine. This should be fine. And here I need a cider block. So I'm going to use the VPC cider block. It's going to be my variable. Let's see, AWS. Let me go to my VPC and get my VPC cider block. So I use main. Here we use VPC ID here. So we just change the ID to VPC cider block. Here. So VPC main. I think it's still the same thing. So instead of this, we just have cider block. And we don't need IPv6. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to do the same thing for this one here. I don't need this. I don't need this. So I'm opening port 443 and port 80 for my security group, and that is fine. I'm just going to quickly deploy that while I comment out the load balancer. Comment that out. Okay, we created it on Wednesday. Yeah, I will just quickly create a new one. Okay, security group created. So I need to unblock the load balancer, and now I'm going to use the security group of that load balancer. I'm going to use the security group that I just created. So I'm going to copy the block name, and I'm just going to change the block name to this. And for subnet in AWS public subnet, get the subnet ID. So that is fine too. I can use this, but I don't have public subnet. I'm going to go to my public subnet. I'm going to go to my public subnet. What do I call my public subnet block? My public subnet block is called main public subnet. So for the load balancer, I'm going to name it main instead of public. And that is everything I need. And I don't need access log. So I'm going to check, delete this. I don't need it for this. Delete, I don't want enable delete protection, because I want to be able to terminate the resources without going to modify it in the console. So everything is fine. Everything is fine now. So this is creating I'm going to call this one web ALP, application load, okay, balancer. Then I'm going to deploy it. And it's also creating a application load balancer attachment. Okay, I created this earlier. Okay. So that is a different thing. So I'm just going to deploy this quick. And once we deploy the second application load balancer, I'm going to round it up because alphabetically is name under load balancer. Okay, let's see what's the issue here. It's complaining of 182, which is this side, and it said only alphanumeric character and hyphen allowed. So space is not allowed. I'm going to close the gap. So we're going to have a load balancer. I'm going to go to my load balancer. Then we have a load balancer here. See, load balancer is created. If you open it, we have a load balancer. So it doesn't have any listener. That is fine. We can create a listener later. So let's go back. One is created. So while we are waiting for the second one, if you open the load balancer and go to the security group, you see the security group that we created was used. Then if you open the subnet, we have two subnets, subnet 1 and subnet 2, which are for our public subnets. Then that is good. And let's see, is it still creating or is finished creating? It's still creating. So while we are waiting for this to create, to fully created, I'm going to copy the load balancer and I'm going to take it to the application layer and also create a load balancer for my application layer. I'm going to call this application, so just call it load balancer for application servers. And this one is going to be load balancer for web or for web servers. Are these fully created or still creating? Still creating, taking forever. Network map, you see, use yeah, use the two public subnets 1 and 2. That is good. Then the next one, so the this application layer load balancer is going to be the end for the training. That's going to be the end for the training. This is taking forever. I hope we don't have any issue in our load balancer. Okay, finally created. So let's see anything I need to be modified. Security group attached, so that is fine. So I'm just going to quickly create the second one, the last one. Where is that application layer? Okay, I'm going to paste it here, and this one is going to be application load balancer. Everything is going to be the same, but instead of internal is false, internal is going to be true because it's internal load balancer, and everything should be fine. So if I don't want to really mess up with the security group, but if I want to make it, I'll have to create a separate security group for this and use the security group, but I'm just going to use the same security group. And for the subnet, I'm going to use the private subnet. The private subnet for this. And this is, I'm just going to change the private subnet. Instead of the main, I'm going to put the private subnet. Okay, here, instead of main, I'm changing it to private subnets. And this specifically I don't want to use for each here because it's going to create, it's going to look through all the private subnets, and I don't want that. I only want 2 private subnets. So in that regard, I might specifically call those private subnets that I need instead of using the loop function. So here I want to say I need the private subnet at index0.id. Then I need the second one, which is at index1.id, instead of him looping through the entire private subnet. So that is that. Say already declared. Was that okay? Web app already declared. So I'm going to call this one app application load balancer. Okay, I think we've come to the end of the section. The only thing that I would like to do now is the final thing, is the application load balancer attachments, because I need to attach both the load balancer and the target group together. So at this point, I'm just going to say application load, that is under load, load balancer listener is what I want to create now. So for the load balancer listener, I just need to specify a particular port that I want to listen to where it should be forwarding the traffic to. So I can use, I have my load balancer, I have my application target group, then I'm going to use a listener to join them together. So I'm going to go for the web layer first. Web layer. So immediately under the web layer, I'm going to do application, load balancer at listener. Then I'm going to paste the listener here. I'm going to modify, it should be listening on port 80 and not 443 normally, but in real life scenario, you want to make sure that it's listening on port 443. Port 443, yeah. And this I'm changing it to HTTP because I don't have certificates, and for the certificates I'm going to delete it. And I don't want certificate, I'm going to delete it. I can create a certificate for it using AWS certificate manager, but I'm not going through that route. And I'm going to leave SSL policy as with this. So for the forwarding, I want you to forward this to the target group that I created for the application layer. And that should be this. No, this is load balancer target group. Yeah, that should be this. So it should be sending it to the target group, the one for the web and not front end. That is that. And I'm going to do exactly, I'm going to call this one web listener. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the second one. And I'm going to call it, for the application layer, I'm going to call it, this is going to be app listener. And the only thing I'm going to change is this. So instead of web, let me see, what name do we call the application target group? So the application target group is called application TG. So this is the application layer, and this is the application listener, and here we are changing this to application target group. So this is the final thing that I'm going to be adding to this. I'm going to say that I'm going to apply both of them at the same time to end the class. Okay, I have an issue. Let me see what's the issue here. Okay, I have the same thing, front end for the load balancer ARN. Okay, sorry, I need to change the load balancer ARN. The load balancer ARN, yeah, this. So my load balancer is not front end. I'm going to remove it. The load balancer is called application load balancer for this one, and I'm pasting that here. And the load balancer for the second one, I mean for the first one, the load balancer for the first one is called app load balancer. So where's the ARN? Yeah, that's called app load balancer. And for the web, yeah, the load balancer is called for the web. The load balancer is called web ALB. So I'm going to change this one to web ALB, and I'm going to redeploy both of them. Okay, it said listener cannot be specified for. Okay, I've just removed that. Okay, because that's the certificate, I'm removing that. Then I'm removing for the second one too. Then just recreate it. All right, finally. So we've deployed everything that we need. So if you go to the application load balancer, you have a web application load balancer that is attached to two subnets and is listening on port 8C to and is forwarding the traffic to the web target group. And if you go to the second one, which is load balancer, we have two load balancer. We have the application load balancer that is listening to two subnets, and it's an internal one, and is forwarding the traffic to the application target group. So this is the end of the whole deployment. And the other thing that I may want to add to this is the auto scaling group, but I do not indicate auto scaling group in my architectural diagram. So this is only the diagram that I architect and I plan to deploy, because I might extend this in another video to show you how you can add an auto scaling group to this. I want to say thank you to everybody that are watching this either now or in future time. I know this is a very long video, but I just don't want to break it down, because if I break it down, then it might not serve the purpose. If you have any question regarding this deployment, kindly leave a comment section. Leave a comment in the comment section. If you really like this deployment, please give us a thumbs up, comment on this, share it, subscribe, and press the notification bell so that when we post another video, you'll be the first to see that. See you later. Thank you. God bless. Bye.